Hello, MissPetiteGeek here, and despite the bad reviews and low ratings for the film, I still went to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What a mess. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to cover the general points, so no spoilers yet. I will let you know when they are coming up. If I could sum up this movie in one word, it would be pointless. Honestly, it's the kind of movie where you walk out and forget it exists a few minutes later, and that may just be me. But I also feel that's kind of not fitting for a TMNT property. I mean, the premise itself is pretty out there, so good or bad, like it or not, it usually leaves some form of impression. This movie really doesn't. Now, I usually avoid watching bad films in general, so take this statement for what it's worth, but this film was one of the worst films I've gone to see in a while. I mean technically bad from a writing standpoint. Script, characters, plot, pacing, that sort of thing. Not painful enough or like boringly bad, but it's also not quite bad enough that's enjoyable in its terribleness, like something like The Room. There is some stuff that can be poked fun at, which is nice, but only some of it. The action sequences overall were decent enough to keep me invested, especially since the runtime of the film is shorter, so if you don't enjoy it, you're out of the theater quicker. Still, I would advise bringing a friend along. That's what I did, and it made the film way more enjoyable. I mean, we would just turn to each other and give, like, that look in some of those really cliched lines and sections of the script. So to give you a better idea of what I'm trying to describe with this film, before the movie came out, people were saying, oh, it's just going to be another Michael Bay film, and then others would defend it, saying, well, Michael Bay's only producing it. But honestly, the man who did direct it he doesn't have a very good track record either. And after seeing the film, Michael Bay might as well have directed this film. I mean, it might have even turned out better if he did. It's got the same overused plot devices, lack of plot in general, exploitation of women, boring characters, all of the Michael Bay film experience we love to hate. Just in this case, it somehow equaled an even worse film. So here's a rundown of some of the good and bad aspects of the film. So the good, some of the changes in the film were not as bad as we expect them to be. Megan Fox, as much as I despise her as an actress, if you don't know why, go look up why she got fired from Transformers. She actually didn't do a horrendous job. I mean, with what she was given, which was not a lot, she did okay. Was she April O'Neil? Heck no. But neither was the version of the character in the script. That's not really her fault. She's probably about as good as you might expect her to be. I expected her to be horrendous, so I was actually pleasantly surprised that she was decent. Also, the designs for the turtles, as much grief as we gave them, aren't that bad. Pointless, as I don't feel the added bulk or size really contributes to the film in any way, and may even cause problems down the line for sequels like fighting villains and stuff like that. They're not all that distracting. Some people even liked the add-ons to the characters, like Donnie's extra equipment, Mikey's shell necklace, but again, I felt they were kind of pointless, and personally I felt the amount they did was over the top. As I mentioned before, the action sequences are decent. I wouldn't say great, but it does take a lot to impress me when it comes to battle sequences, especially when the characters are CGI. But there is a pretty nice action sequence. There's a downhill sequence where they're fighting in the snow. It's a bit more inventive than the other sequences. It's visually appealing. It's also got a little bit of decent humor. Thank you, Mikey. Now, most people who review this film say that the best part of the film is the turtles. And I agree. But honestly, that's really not saying that much. The voice actors and motion capture did a great job for the most part. And it was really nice to see that they got the turtles' personalities right. Not to mention that they're definitely more interesting than any of the other human characters in the film. But that doesn't mean the personalities were well presented or developed, because they weren't. I felt they were really shoehorned in. The writer obviously knew the turtles well, right down to like Raph and Leo's rivalry, the turtles' interests, basic personality traits. Unfortunately, giving them the traits of the turtles is different than really expanding on their personalities. They definitely got the turtles right, but I always felt there was just something off and lacking, empty and hollow there. I laughed at a couple of Mikey's jokes, and I was even pleased to see the sibling rivalry there. I mean, Donnie working with technology, Leo being the leader, all of that. But character isn't just about personality through dialogue, it's about development and interactions and personality. Oh, I could keep ranting, but I will move on. Speaking of the turtles, this unfortunately brings me to the bad. They're not the focus of the film. April is, and that's a problem. Not just because it means a lack of turtles, but it also means more boring characters the audience is not interested in. We spend such a great deal of time at the beginning with uninteresting characters rather than developing the characters we paid money to see. As I mentioned before, April is not interesting or well developed as a character and has no iota of personality besides being a Lois Lane journalism ripoff with a hint of sexual exploitation. And speaking of rip-offs, I will not go into the specific instances yet. They will be in the spoiler sections of where they basically just stole the plot from the Amazing Spider-Man film. So I might recommend watching that film instead. It's much better. Just insert the turtles instead of Peter Parker and voila. And speaking of plot, it is just existent enough to drive the characters to do something. There is enough to hold the movie together, and that is about it. Alright, so some of the other problems I had to do with characters. First of all, Splinter. Yeah, this is my least favorite version of the character. As much as I love the voice actor Tony Shalhoub, it's clear the voice is a bit forced, and Splinter himself just comes off as a bit too harsh. He's more of a disciplinarian than a father figure for the Turtles. Next, I have a slight complaint about Donnie's character, and this has to do with a little bit of the voice acting for the Turtles. Now, don't get me wrong, the voice actor did a great job, but the voice was just too over the top for me. Donnie is a technological genius and a lovable geek, but the movie gave him an unrealistically stereotypical nerd voice, complete with awkward verbalizations of emotions and a snort when he laughs. Yeah, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Fortunately, most of the other issues I have with the film do pertain to spoilers, so we will now be entering the spoiler section. And now that we're in the spoiler section, let's start off with the villains. So, the villains of this film were unfortunately less than generic. The awesomeness that is usually the Shredder is useless and underutilized. They took one of the most iconic villains of all time and reduced him to a means to an end. A weapon, essentially. There's no history between Splinter and Shredder, which has always been a driving force for the rivalry between the Shredder and the Turtles. Basically, they took away his motivation, his personality, his drive, and even his name. I mean, what kind of villain is that? Then there's Eric Sachs, who takes the roles of both Shredder's student and an evil scientist, which have always been essentially Karai and Stockman. So why didn't they just have Karai and Stockman? I don't know, it's beyond me. I guess they just wanted to have that overdone greedy corporate dude wanting to make more money through an evil scheme plot. Again, like we haven't seen that enough. Lastly, the Foot Clan in general is pretty dumb. I mean, just the fact that they are carrying guns goes against everything the Foot Clan is. I may be reading too much into it, being too hard on it, but even the Shredder himself said they were pretty pathetic. Okay, so now on to some story elements. Also, please note there will be small spoilers for some of the background and plot information of the IDW's comics, though I don't consider it that spoilerish as most of this stuff is revealed within the first 5 to 6 issues. But, just in case you're planning on starting it anytime soon or just started it, I just wanted to give you a fair warning. The film reboots the origins of the Turtles again, and I like it for the most part. The elements of the backstory that are similar to the IDW's comics really work pretty well, such as the Turtles being regular Turtles involved in some experiments with the mutagen, and that's kind of where the mutation stems from. In the film, April's father is one of the scientists working on these experiments. April names the Turtles, interacts with them, she even saves Splinter and the Turtles from a fire that destroys the lab. So in the new IDW's comics, again, the Turtles are part of experiments in a lab where they're also testing mutagen. April interacts and names Splinter and the Turtles as well, except she herself is the scientist, and Splinter saves her. The only part I don't like is they're missing the reincarnation angle of the IDW's comics, where the Turtles and Splinters are reincarnation of Hamato Yoshi and his 4 sons, who were essentially killed by the Foot Clan and Orokusaki, aka the Shredder. And there's that piece of backstory for the characters is just missing in the film. In the film, they tried to compensate for some of those missing elements, like having Splinter find a book on martial arts in the sewers and teaching himself and then teaching the Turtles. Just because he wants to, I guess? Do you see how it doesn't quite add up? In the rest of the versions, there's a reason he knows martial arts and a reason he teaches it to the Turtles. Whether it's self-defense or revenge against Orokusaki, there's no motivation here. Alright, so the last little negative part of the movie comes from just the amount of sheer dumbness that is in this film. I mean, the ending where they're trying to send out the virus to New York, and they're doing it in a colored cloud in the daytime from the corporation's giant tower. Like, no one could tell it was them doing it. Like, no one would be able to tell who the villain is. It's pretty silly, not to mention an exact ripoff of The Amazing Spider-Man. Right down to how the tower falls. There's also the part where April and Vernon are hiding from Eric Sachs, and he's shooting at them when he could just walk around the counter and kill them both. Then there's the adrenaline on the machine where literally April just goes up and presses a button. Stuff like that is just everywhere in the film. And speaking of April in the film, let's talk about that romance they brought up with Vernon. Okay, so, I mean, April's had romances before. I mean, her romance with Casey Jones goes back to the comics. It's always been there. And then, more recently, we've seen the emergence of April Tello, which is April and Donnie. Because of some interactions in the 2003, people started liking it. It got transferred into the 2012 Nickelodeon cartoon. And now for the new film, they decided to pair up April and Vernon. Oh, it's a little bit painful. Oh, where do I start? Vernon's character is pretty obnoxious. Sorry, actor who plays him. A lot of people like him as an actor. They think he's funny. I've never found him funny, so I really wasn't expecting much from the character to begin with. It doesn't work, and needless to say, I'm pretty sure both the Capril and April Tello shippers out there weren't so happy. But also my friend who saw it with me, who only knows basic Ninja Turtles, hated the pairing. One, he said April's too good for him, and two, his came from I'm sick of seeing the guy get the girl in the end of superhero stuff. He's like, I'm done with the superhero and the damsel of distress. I don't care. And so, yeah, he wasn't happy about that. Alright, but let me leave you on a little bit more of a high note. So here were the best parts of the film. Alright, so the first one is the elevator scene. I think it encompasses so much of what people wanted to see from the Turtles. It incorporates a lot of the humor that people have come to know the Turtles by. It incorporates the Turtles' personalities distinctively without any dialogue whatsoever. It's this part of the film where as soon as it starts, you're like, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be the most awkward part of the film. I can't believe I have to sit through this. And it's the best sequence. It's so good. It's so funny. Also at the end is the Turtles clinging on for dear life to the tower as it tumbles down, giving their goodbyes and all that kind of stuff to each other. I mean, Raph's speech was a little out of place and Leo didn't even get one. But for the most part, it was really nice to see that interaction, the brothers talking to each other in that kind of peril situation. Again, that is what I want to see from the Turtles. My personal little favorite is the "it's so bad it's good." The line, "drain all their blood, even if it kills them." That is the worst line of dialogue I have ever heard in my entire life, and I died in the theater of laughter. I want to give my hats off to that line. It made my experience so much better. And lastly, just the little references here and there. They were nice enough to give a little Easter eggs and stuff, and I don't even know if half of them were on purpose, but I did like them. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of April fainting when she meets the Turtles, but it's kind of a thing now. And so seeing her fainting with the Turtles and everything was nice to see. The mention of the Turtles' Christmas hip-hop album, which actually exists, is fantastic. So, all in all, the film is pretty bad. You know, I think it's even bad for Michael Bay standards, which is saying something. But I don't necessarily regret seeing it, except for the point that I gave money to it, and I really didn't want to do that. But, you know, it's nice to know that even in the worst of films, they still understand the Turtles' characters, and that makes me really happy. So, yeah, take care, and I'll see you next time.